Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, recorded at River Road Studios in Eugene, Oregon. Hey, you know what? When I'm not here and I'm not doing this, I'm doing graphic design. And Candace and I work with a company. We own a company called Mud Paw Design House. And we've been transitioning from a service-based company completely to more of a product-based company. So that means if you want a banner, for instance, normally you'd say, Patrick, I want a banner. And I design you a banner. And then we'd say, okay, where do you want to get it printed? It was all about service. Mm-hmm. Now, and the price was kind of variable because the design it was open-ended.
Right.
How long would it take to design it, whatever. And then there'd be a banner printing. Well, now we're changing that idea to being more product. So you say to me, I want a banner. I'm like, oh, well, what size banner? And then you say this. And I say, well, it's going to cost you this much. And done. And then at the end of the day, I invoice you on the day of, like you say, okay, Patrick, the design is the way we want it. And we want to order it. I'm like, okay, great. I'll send you an invoice. You pay it. Done. I'm not going to invoice you at the end of the month for design and give an invoice for printing at the beginning of the month. Because that's what we've been doing now. And it's been working. I mean, we were doing this for 15 years and we decided, well, now it's time to change. So we can be more competitive and turn things around for people than holding or invoicing 30 days out when all they really did was 30 minutes of work with us.
Right. So, well, are you doing website design still too?
Oh, yeah.
And does that include like social media stuff?
No, that's entirely different.
That's a totally different ball of wax.
Yeah,
we'll help them get their profiles and stuff set up. But in terms of actually making regular posts, I see.
I mean, we can integrate, we can add shares, we can do all that stuff
as part of the design part of it. To get them started.
The feature set.
I see.
We're not going to post every day for them. And we're not going to that. There's a really social media people for that. Yeah. And there's a whole program for that we just don't do. I mean, can't do everything.
Right. So, but you get it started.
Right.
Okay.
And we're working on getting that to be more of a fixed cost as well. Websites are a little more complicated, but
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but the business cards, the banners, the brochures, you say, hey, we want this. Okay, if you want us to do the design, it's going to cost this. Mm-hmm. Done. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to. It's just like going to, I don't want to say competitor's name, but go to like the FedEx and you want to buy a banner there. Mm-hmm. You buy a banner, you're done. They may never see you again.
Right.
So that's what we're going to kind of move to a little bit. So, so that's what we're kind of doing and reworking and rebranding and getting all this stuff done. In fact, we just got our business cards designed finally.
Oh,
design it takes forever.
Yeah.
So
what did they say about the cobbler's kids?
Yeah, the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes.
Uh-huh.
So that's what Candace and I are doing. So Sue, when you're not here, sitting in front of the microphone recording,
yes.
What are you doing?
I'm going totally mad. I have Occupy Medical, of course, and that's the 501c3 that I've been working with.
What's your real role there?
I'm the clinic manager and lead herbalist. I'm also on the board.
Okay.
So as a founder, they like having you wander around. And
do you get a special T-shirt that says founder on it?
No. I'm the one that it's myself and another one of the founders. We're really good at picking heroin needles up with the little grabbers. So it's a skill set.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And since we have a building now, we're not doing that. I haven't done that for almost a year.
Yay.
Because of the building, have you seen the numbers go down, the numbers go up?
Oh, man. Okay. So we knew the numbers were going to go down just because we moved. And we've moved before because, mobile clinic. But there was a big snafu with a bunch of unhoused folk and an agency and county and blah, blah, blah. It just went on. So they paid a low-cost clinic to come in and do a weekly clinic. And we decided, well, there's special things that Occupy Medical does too. So we'll come in and we'll volunteer and do some time there as well. And we did site visits, whereas the low-cost clinic just sat in the room and had people come to them. And they had different things that they offered. So we figured we were a pretty good combination. The low-cost clinic was being paid to be there, and we weren't. So when the low-cost clinic, when they stopped being paid, then they went back to doing whatever they were doing, and we just kept doing it. So now we have 2 clinics every week, and it's the second clinic, the one on Wednesday, it's in Eugene. It's in situated in a room where we just bring all of our stuff like we did before and do whatever we can to help people. And we have nurses and herbalists and things like that. And we've had haircut volunteers come in and offer haircuts, which is a really nice aspect of that as well. And then some items where people can walk away and make their lives better with toothbrushes and our standard socks, standard old Occupy Medical things. And so that means that we are basically doing twice as many folks as we were doing before.
So, but your resources haven't increased.
Here's another thing is that our resources, because we're in a building, it's easier for me personally to chase down some of these donations. Wise Women Herbals offered a huge donation of gallons of tincture,
nice,
which was just fabulous.
Yeah.
And they're a local company, and we're very grateful for that. But that would not have been possible if I had been living the life that I was doing before, which was make a clinic, do a clinic, break down a clinic. Here we go, Sunday, let's do it again. And then during the week, I'm drawing tents with my buddies and trying to, oh my gosh, do we have enough pregnancy tests or lab results for folks or whatever. Now things come to the office. People can fax from there, which is something we couldn't do before. I don't have to keep prescription pads in a lockbox in my house. It's in the office, locked up. Like everything is just.
It's an interesting, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's an interesting parable because you were not able to take advantage of the things that you could take advantage of because you didn't have a home.
Right. Yeah.
But now that you have a home, the donations are coming, the things are coming, everything is like, so it's that oxymoronic statement, that catch-22. You need a home to do these things, but you can't get a home because you don't have these things.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's, I do hear people in my circles sometimes have a very callous view. And I'm like, have you ever tried to get a job if you don't have an address?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
You can't.
Or mail or tax information or anything else that you need if you don't have a place.
Keep a job. Just charge your phone.
And I also,
basic stuff.
So it gets frustrating. So I sympathize, but I think that's an interesting kind of, for you, even the clinic as large as it was for a volunteer organization is dealing with that. That's now that you have a home, we can bring you pallets of stuff and we can bring you this and we can bring you that.
That's right.
Interesting.
It's easier to keep volunteers. It's easier to engage donors because we have a place where we can walk them through. Right.
Yeah. They can see what's happening. Mm-hmm. Although I would venture to guess that the bus was impressive.
The bus is impressive. It really is. But when it's there, it's either set up or breakdown, or when there are patients in it, we can't have folk go through.
Yeah.
But yes, and that is a unique and interesting piece. But there's no medicine like a roof.
Yeah.
And it's been good for me. I didn't realize how pushed to the breaking point I really was until we moved into that place and actually had time to go.
Oh,
well, I've got a few minutes on my hand. What am I going to do?
Your friends noticed it. I mean, we noticed where you were at.
Yeah, so. I was so on the edge. So yes, to make a short story long, that's that's what I do. And then there's the consulting part, herbal consulting, and I love talking about herbs, of course. Mm-hmm. And then there's doing this. I mean, I love doing all the research, and the Herbal Nerd Society is so fabulous because there are so many things I wouldn't be researching if I didn't have the Herbal Nerd Society right there.
Yeah.
And it helps me be a better herbalist in the clinic as well because, that people are asking questions like, oh, biochemically, I know exactly what that one is. Let me bore you with the details. So,
Right.
So that's my life.
That's your deal.
That's my smile. It's fun. Yeah. And I should also say I am proud to announce that I'm getting an award this month.
In May or June?
We are in June. June sometime as a healthcare hero So I'll have a link up there about that.
That's cool.
So, yep.
So what do you get with that t-shirt?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I'd never even heard of that award, but I got it nominated for the award. I got an award in March, May. I don't know where we are. April. I got an award in April, and I was like a runner-up. So they gave me a free museum pass to go to museums around the country. You just go.
That's cool.
So when I go to Portland, I could go to OMSI, and so that was kind of fun. And that's just cool. From being a community volunteer. And then this one is, I guess the Register Guard is setting it up. So I'll have more information about that when it actually happens. But I'd never heard of the award. I'm sure it don't come with any money. Just the excitement of being pictured in our tiny little town newspaper.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the Register Guard is part of the AP. So if they write an article, they do share that article, and other places can pick it up. So you never know.
Yeah.
Well, and we all like to be recognized.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
I can tell you it is really painful to not get recognized for what you do. So the fact that you're getting recognized is really important.
Yeah. And of course, I wouldn't be in that position if it wasn't for all the work that we as Occupy Medical and as herbalists all do together. So, the fickle finger of fate happens to be on me right now, but it's yes, I do a lot of work, but because I'm part of a big group of people that also do a heck of a lot of work. So
you're a good team leader, and because you're the leader, you get recognized.
Yes,
whether it's good or bad.
Right. Oh yes.
Yes. And I know you've taken a lot of heat at various points for various reasons. Some of which may have been your fault or your team's fault, and some of which may not have been so much so.
That is true.
So the fact that there's recognition that's positive coming your way, I think it's really wonderful you're getting it.
I know I definitely get a free drink and free appetizers.
All right.
So there you go.
Woohoo!
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
So we had Yaakov back again. He's I think he's been on the show more than anybody.
Yeah, he's a sweetie.
Yeah. And he was talking about Berberine. But the interesting part of that conversation, aside from Berberine, was what we were talking about before we started recording, which was the whole idea of isolating specific constituents. And we wanted to talk about that as it pertains to herbalism, right? And how how you guys as herbalists would help your clients. I'm trying to use the right wording here.
What can we do?
Yes, as herbalists, none of us have patience. We all have, we might have a lot of patience, but we don't have patience. Yeah. We have clients.
Right. So
whether we're working with a doctor or not, it's safest to say clients if you're talking about an herbalist.
That is true. But with that being said, how do you make sure that you're doing that? So that's what we're going to talk about this day. Herb Lab is, I think, about constituents and how they're isolated and how we work with them and how you move forward and the cautions involved, I guess. And if I'm wrong, I guess I'll have to re-record the intro. So now your hosts, Candace. So here are your hosts. No, wait.
Now here are your hosts.
Now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Sue Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Lupe. And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. I'm glad you got our names right, though.
At least
the second time. That was good, Patrick.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. That's 189 times I've done that or more.
Well, actually, for you, it's more like 389.
Yeah, okay.
You screwed up every off.
Oh,
some of that.
Ooh,
no, actually, there's a bunch at the beginning. You've been pretty good for the past 89 or so.
Okay, I'm just, you know what? I'm just going to take that out and never just say it again. Just do it mechanically every time.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Yeah, so, that'll teach us.
Yeah. Well, the listeners might complain. I'll just forward those to you, Patrick.
There you go. Well, we've also had this conversation, lapsed into it a few times before, that you were talking about, Patrick, were single constituents versus whole plant.
Yeah.
And I personally have learned a lot more about what that means. I know when I was first starting to become more serious as an herbalist, when you and I I'm pointing, you guys can't see this, to the Hunter family here, that I was complaining about the single constituents and standardized extracts and how that's problematic, which I still see a lot of problems with standardization. But I also have learned to appreciate some of the value of some of the standardization too. So I'm not, I guess that's kind of my lot in life, is to look at something and get a little huffy about it and then find out more and say, okay, well, there's some good things too. No.
Well, when would you need a full-on 100% active ingredient constituent?
That really depends on what you're looking at. I mean, we just talked to Dr. Rajna Patel about CBD, and CBD is exactly that. It's an isolated constituent that's been stripped out of the rest of the chemical soup it came from. Mm-hmm. And berberine would be similar. So, sometimes it perhaps makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I have to admit that personally, I find it very hard to be comfortable with single constituent stuff and with standardization because nature's ever changing. We as humans are ever changing. The diseases we face are ever changing. And to think that one standard, specific, clear-cut dose that's unchanging is going to solve the problems that we face, it seems like, well, it's a pot shot. Maybe it will hit this time, but next time maybe not. And maybe what we stripped out was exactly the stuff that would have made it successful.
Right. Because as usual, things are more complex than we think they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then, Yaakov has been right about a lot of things. And I may not like to admit it, but he has been right about a lot of things. And perhaps berberine is one of them. Mm-hmm. I don't know yet.
Well, he had said there are some situations, he was a little biggy on this one, but he said there are some situations where you'd need a lot more berberine than you could tolerate by taking the adequate amount of Oregon grape or goldenseal or coptis or what have you. And I can see where he's definitely coming from if you had something like MRSA.
Right. Yeah.
Which is very common. However, some of the times when we've had MRSA come through our clinic a lot and have been able to deal with it by giving people Oregon grape and berberine rich plants, as well as working on their diet. And when we have the luxury of doing that, there was a gentleman visitor that came through that had the MRSA was really bad. Pieces of his face were coming off from it. And of course, because he was unhoused, he wasn't getting the treatment or the acknowledgement for the vulnerable spot that he was in. Mm-hmm. And because it looked so bad, he was getting treated poorly by
by
everyone,
everybody.
Even people that were supposed to be assisting him. So when he went to the hospital, for example, the hospital gave him a prescription for high dose ibuprofen, and then I gave him an antibiotic, which for
That's
MRSA
not going to be likely to help much.
keeps the cycle going. Yeah. So that was disappointing, and then promptly put him out onto the street. Which, when you think about a person in that position, you think, well, now this person is in a position where they're going to be spreading that highly contagious disease to the rest of the general public.
That's really, really smart.
So this hospital is in a residential area, and that was a grave concern for us. So fortunately, he happened to wander over to where we were, and we worked with him and helped him out, and then walked him right back over to the hospital with some accompanying volunteers to give a little more information about what we knew. I mean, the gentleman in question was in a great deal of pain, as you can well imagine. And so he was not able to advocate for himself, or be as clear as he needed to be.
Even when you're not homeless or unhoused, you walk into the hospital and I feel like you kind of need to have a third-party advocate walking in with you next to you to help get the hospitals and the doctors and the nurses to slow down long enough to listen.
Yeah, because they're running out of the gun all the time. The elderly, that's a perfect example. Particularly, as we know, people that are elderly and they'll get UTI, a urinary tract infection, and they will act like they have dementia, just like that. And you give them an antibiotic, and within a few hours, they're acting just like they normally would. It happens very quickly. So that would be an example of a population that, when they come in for a little bit of help, if they are coming in, they definitely need an advocate to say, this is not the normal behavior that I'm used to seeing. So
well, even just when you're in and you're not feeling well, you're scared, you don't really know what's wrong with you. It can be hard to communicate in the language that the doctor needs to hear. And honestly, to me, that seems shameful that the doctor should need you to use his or her language. They should be trying to figure out your language because you're the vulnerable one. Right. You're the one who's hurting, who's scared, who's not necessarily a fully frame of mind and able to argue your case in front of a court of law, as it were.
But it's hard to sometimes pick out when somebody comes in, you have zero context.
Right. Which is why an advocate would be helpful.
Yeah, no matter what.
But we don't have that system.
So. We don't. But in those particular cases that I just talked about, having berberine, that would be fabulous.
Would be helpful.
Yeah, for both of those infections.
So that's an example of using a high potent constituent to help.
Standard.
But what about the everyday? I mean, do you just...
Well, that's part of where I wonder. I mean, even we talk about like using CBD, I personally question whether or not using CBD or even talking about it as being CBD is wise. It seems like we should say
CBD, THC.
Well, it's marijuana. That's what we should just call it. It's cannabis, the plant, and we should be using the whole plant. And even the scientific studies are showing that a very small portion of THC with CBD better potentiates medicine. So let's just call it marijuana or cannabis.
Or hemp.
Let's just call it what the plant's name is and not try to isolate it. It seems to me like it would just be smarter.
What happens when you make tinctures? Is that isolating?
No.
That's when you're you're concentrating the constituents. You're basically not putting any of the fiber in there, which makes up a lot of the bulk, and the water. You're taking that out, and you just have a more concentration of the constituents. In some ways, you could argue that there is some isolation there because you're taking out the mark, the plant fiber,
the chaff, if you
Yep. Exactly.
Well, and there are some things that don't extract as well into alcohol as into other substances, for instance.
True.
So you might be not getting every single constituent that the plant could offer, but you're getting a large portion of them.
Right. Which is why sometimes these tinctures will not just have water and alcohol, but will also have a little bit of glycerin in it or some kind of sugar to pull out some of the
it's like another layer of constituents.
Right. Yeah. Some of them are soluble that way. Sometimes it's put in there if you've got a plant that has a lot of starches that kind of roll around and that stabilizes it, turns it into more of an emulsion.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's why I was asking. I mean, I didn't really understand. So.
It's also why in some medical systems or some herbal systems, they rely mostly, like there's tinctures is like the majority of the work, whereas others they want you to use decoctions or infusions as the majority. So it's the same sage root tinctured versus decocted is going to have slightly different properties to it.
So when you say decoct, like a tea?
Yeah. It's a long cooked tea.
With the long cooked tea, so would you think that would be a milder, I don't want to say dosing, but
no. I mean, you take a larger portion. You might take, several ounces of the decoction.
Okay.
Yeah. And of the tincture, it might be a matter of like 2 dropperfuls, which is, what does that come out to, Sue?
A standard dropperful, as it were, is 0.8 mils. It can vary a little bit. So
a mil versus
1.5 mils.
Yeah. Teaspoon or less versus, half a cup in terms of volume. But
Yep. And it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So you can have the same plant if you really want that, the water soluble constituents of St. John's wort, for example, then you want it fresh, and you want to put it in the alcohol fresh as quickly as you can so it doesn't dry out. But you're going to see a lot of the flavonoids will disappear when you expose it to light, or there's a whole bunch of reasons why people would want different versions of it.
Yeah.
Some people might find that things are unsettling to their stomach, or I have a something that I've been giving out, which is a type of syrup, and I promise to put a recipe on our website by the time y'all are hearing this, which is you just take honey or brown rice syrup or some kind of sweetener, and then you just take a powder of whatever herb it is and you stir it in there, the end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a spread, I guess is what it is.
It's like making a...
you said powder, right?
Yeah, powder, yeah.
Okay.
It's like making an elixir.
It didn't sound like powder, so I thought, is this a new herbal term?
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, just a powder.
Okay.
Yeah, I think isn't that called an elixir? No, not an elixir.
I don't know.
Forgot, there's a specific name for that.
It's a spread.
I should remember this, but
yep, it's a spread.
It's a spread.
Yeah. There probably is a fancy term that I do
it's
not
a
know
luctuary.
That's luctuary, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's an electuary with weighted more heavily toward the head, honey, right? But essentially that's an electuary.
Yeah, and the sweetness of it makes it much more palatable, and the even like brown rice, which is not very sweet. If you had a patient or a client or whatever your word is you want to use to come in and they have their iron anemia, then putting it in molasses, mixing something like that into molasses, like yellow dock, that would be good. And you have to be careful because that you can take yellow dock, like one teacher, the 0.4, the 0.8 mils, and it's not gonna cause you to go to the bathroom for a long time because of the pooping issue. But you take a hefty teaspoon of that electuary, I guess is what we're calling, with the yellow dock in it, and gracious sakes, there will be an effect. So you need to be very cautious about how much you take, and that's just powder.
And be well prepared.
Be prepared
to deal with the ramifications of your taste test.
Yep. But for those times, the powdering, it's difficult to take, but the softness of the honey helps your stomach digest it a little bit more. It's not so hard, and you're not going to give you the burps so much.
Right.
So for people that are really constipated, like if they have opioids or the things like SSRIs will give people constipation as well. Yeah. Then that's a nice way to keep their iron up and give them something that's a little more palatable to taste for things. Yep.
Yeah, I've made electuaries actually with Oregon grape root.
And that's just what powdered. You do. You just stir. You just have honey and you just stir in the powder.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a tendency to stir less honey, more powder, so that I can form it into like little balls.
Oh, right.
But it doesn't matter whether you make it that thick or whether you make it thinner and make it so that you could spoon it. It's still called an electuary as long as it's with honey. I don't know what it would be called if it isn't with honey.
Yeah,
because I know that just happens to be one of those honey terms, like metheglin. It's also a honey term.
So you're using Oregon grape powder.
Yeah, I've used Oregon grape powder.
To deal with an infection.
I used it as a cold and flu prevention and or remedy for signs. And I put elderberry with it.
Yeah.
Made it a little more palatable.
Because it's very bitter.
It is. It was not a pleasant. Grape. And I actually have to admit, I don't really like those electuaries at all myself. I really don't like the flavor.
Because the sweet and the bitter
for
together,
me,
you don't like that?
Yeah, there was something. And I admit, I love elderberries. But for some reason, I do not like them when they're in sweet things. I prefer elderberries stripped, like in tea. Yes. You
don't like elderberry syrup?
I'm not terribly fond of elderberry syrup.
You're weird.
I know. I don't understand it myself.
I'm just going to judge you right
I can tell you, though, Amazon parrots really like electuaries made with Oregon grape and elderberry, or anything else with elderberry.
Why? What's going?
How would I know this? How would I know this?
Well, I know you got a parrot, but what?
Yes.
What are you doing? Was the parrot ill, or you just said, "Here,
no.
parrot, have this taste"?
I'm not the only one in the family that wouldn't eat those electuaries.
Okay.
And Kiko needed to do some stick training because she would only step up for
Kiko the parrot.
Yeah, she would only step up for Patrick or myself. And I thought, well, someday we may need her. We may be in a position where somebody else needs to safely be able to handle her, perhaps to get her to safety or whatever.
Right.
So stick training is training your parrot or bird, but, specifically usually large parrots get stick trained to step onto a stick so that your hand and their beak can be a foot apart or more, so that you can safely transport a large bird without them having to be on your person. And that helps, in case there's an emergency. So she didn't like the stick. She thought the stick might be evil, and she was quite certain it was going to kill her.
Right.
So I got out my little electuaries and I got her. I've been slowly working at getting her to, now she'll step on the stick, and I moved the stick for the first time. And she did kind of freak out about that, but then she ran off with the electuary and it was okay. So, but she's been slowly, I had like a pint jar that was filled with them. She's been slowly working her way through it.
Interesting. But those are more like honey powder booger things,
balls,
right?
Yeah.
Balls is the word I was looking for.
Yes.
Booger?
They're like the size of
it was in my head.
They're like the size, I made them about the size of like a chickpea or a,
booger, Patrick.
That's a big booger.
That's a really big booger.
Yeah.
How big is your nose?
That's a
Look at this thing. I mean, it's giant. Yeah.
So yes, I can attest to the fact that Oregon grapefruit is tasty to birds as long as you put elderberry with it and lots of honey.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
And I'm certain it hasn't done her any harm, because we did have some runny poos, and runny poos in parrots can indicate an imbalance in bacterial and yeast colonies in them.
Sure.
So, and that often happens when it's been summer and there's been a lot of fruit eating and a lot of eschewing of the vegetables. And there are some big arguments that happen over the vegetables. And I've found that, parrot's probably going to win.
Yep. Yeah, my chickens do not argue with vegetables. They love it all.
Well,
except potatoes.
She prefers the fruit. And we have discussions about the need for eating vegetables. And
Candy.
She'll eat some, but if the fruit's abundant, she won't eat them. And then that causes her whole system to be off balance.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to berberine then. So we were talking about single constituents, standardized as opposed to the whole plant.
Yeah.
And I know particularly with berberine, this is something that Howie taught me, is that the Oregon grape has a couple of different lots and lots, of constituents in it. But one of the constituents works with the cell to kind of open up the cell. And then that allows the berberine to go in and take out the bacterial infection. So working together is one of the parts that is so nice about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that makes me wonder. Yaakov did point out that several of the products he was talking about did include some whole plant.
Right.
So, it's not like he's...
Yeah, it wasn't just a capsule of berberine powder.
Right.
It was,
like the curcumin capsules that people are selling.
Right.
Which seem to be isolated constituents from everything I've heard.
Yep. It's still very orange.
Well, yeah.
Unless they add the coloring.
Well, no, that's the color.
That's the color of curcumin.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes turmeric orange.
And both berberine and curcumin and anything that ends with IN or INE, when you're talking about single constituents, that is an indicator that it's an alkaloid. And most alkaloids are either white or they're clear, but there are some exceptions, and those are some of the exceptions. There's also sanguinarin, which is in red root.
I was going to say, let me guess, it's red.
Right. It's in red, lovely little plant that we have around here, and that one's the color, that red. So these are exceptions to the rule. So anyway, your unwanted chemistry conversation for the day. So the issue that we have with the standardized extracts is, of course, that it may be lacking things that we also need.
Yeah.
But the good part of it is it's a guaranteed amount for people that are very, very, very ill and need so much of whatever it is, whatever property it is, that taking it in food would be impossible. And sometimes I think for some folks, taking something in food because of their condition is very difficult. So having it isolated and standardized would be an advantage to them. If someone has a digestive problem, or if they have esophageal problems or whatever, then that's one nice way to help them out as well. And I'm sure there's a myriad of other things that people are thinking of. Mm-hmm. But that goes to this idea that then you'll be laying there and you'll have berberine inserted into your veins or whatever.
Yeah.
Which gives me a bit of pause. But I know some people, they get really, really sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we don't know what diseases are coming our way. Diseases, they change all the time.
Yep. Just like the plants.
Yep, they do.
It's an ever-changing world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, based on everything that you guys have talked about in the last, how many years I've known you two, having the plant buffering it is much better than the constituent, based on what you've all said.
Yep.
Now, that being said, if you need it in a crisis situation, and that's what's going to fix it, I can understand where that can be important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you're taking it for a longer term, system change, then more constituents, the better. More buffering, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because our bodies are so complex.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lots of things that we respond to. And in the Herbal Nerd Society, we have a lot of different articles about the advantages of taking plants in a variety of different forms. And we also have, for example,
we have one on berberine.
We have one on berberine, the How It Works series. So Herbal Nerd Society members, they just take a look at that and go, oh, right, that one. I'm going to go back and look at that one. But the nice thing about having things in a complex system is our knowledge of medicine and how our bodies work is really fairly primitive. We've got an MRI, and that's helped us a lot to figure out how the fluid works in our bodies. But we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
We're still fairly ignorant. We just added a new body system that makes up 17% of our body, the intersternum system. That was the intersternum system. Do not ask me to spell it, but I'll have it in the show notes. And that's like the bubble wrap that keeps it's under your skin and it keeps your organs together. It's just
the endothelial layer.
Yeah, and we just thought it was just a thing and it didn't really do anything, but come to find out it does more than just keep our organs together. It's a transportation system too.
Yeah.
So you can watch, unpleasantly, you can watch breast cancer cells migrate through that system to other parts of the body. Pleasantly, and we're still learning about this too, you can see how there's communication from one part of the body to another. And it is possible that things like the HPA axis, maybe that's one of the ways that it communicates beyond just going through nerves.
I'm betting that's why mushrooms have a tendency to be so good for helping prevent and deal with cancer.
Oh.
Because they are used to working through exactly that sort of system.
That's a good point. Yep.
The mycelial layer under the surface of the soil.
Yep. That's a good point.
Spreads
across. Of
across.
course, you making context and connections over there.
Does this all the time.
Yeah.
We're still learning. Like, that's the whole point, is we are learning these things as we speak. There's probably some new fabulous discovery that has just been put out there, and like, oh, I didn't know that. And when I was growing up, some of these fabulous discoveries were stuff like, hey, did you know fruits and vegetables are good for you? Because we didn't have proof that it was, so you have to prove some of the obvious stuff first.
Right. I still think it's a little bit funny that we have to prove things for them to be valid. I mean, what are we going to have to prove, that those puffy things you see in the sky are clouds?
Yeah, we do, and we have. We have to.
And it's ridiculous because people have known those are clouds for, millennia.
But there's a lot of other stuff that we've known, quote unquote, known, that would turn out like, whoopsie. That's actually not true. Oh, my bad. My cultural bad that's been going on for thousands of years. Yeah, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't know until you know it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have assumptions. Those get you into all kinds of trouble.
Yep, that is true.
Yep, that is the story of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have an opinion about constituents versus plant buffering versus everything else we've talked about, go ahead and drop us a line. We have forums on the Practical Herbalist. Real Herbalism Radio. There's a tab called podcast. You can go there and you can contact us through that if you have a question. You want to learn something more, it'd be great. If you want to bring the conversation to Facebook, we're on Facebook. Try there. I believe it's facebook.com. We're at the Practical Herbalist.
Yeah.
With facebook.com. That's our moniker. And also, give us a review. Be great. iTunes, anywhere else you listen to our podcast. Reviews are great because that helps people know whether or not what we're saying or what we're doing is worth their time.
Right.
So,
yeah.
All right. So with that,
put an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies